Motivation. Have you ever wondered what drives us to do the things we do? What exactly does it mean when we wake up one day with a sudden drive to perform something out of the ordinary, while on other days we may struggle to even get out of bed? Motivation is the key reason for this, spurring us to accomplish our goals or aspirations with just a simple motive in mind. For instance, many of us may not have started exercising without a desire to acquire something out of it. It was probably after seeing a particular model from a fitness magazine and wanting to be like them, or perhaps because you enjoyed the feeling of exercising that made you want to continue your workout routines. Additionally, motivation is extremely common in our workplaces, where bosses may attempt to implement different incentives to increase our productivity. This may come in the form of recognition or monetary rewards at the end of every year, and is especially effective in a competitive work environment. Motivation was first constructed by psychologists as a theory to explain the reason why people do the things they do. It can be thought of as a cycle in which one's thoughts influences their behavior, which in turn incites performance. As one progresses, their performance would then alter their thoughts, and the cycle repeats. Many different theories have been used to try and explain motivation throughout the years, but intrinsic and extrinsic motivation has remained relevant as it takes into account that human beings are rational creatures. Intrinsic motivation is the self-desire for one to seek newer challenges in order to gain knowledge and from there advance in one's fulfillment in life. This sort of motivation is driven by one's interest and enjoyment in the task without a desire for an external reward such as monetary gains. To further illustrate this theory, let's take a look at Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. His prodigious talent, combined with his hard work at composing, was a result from his intrinsic motivation to create music. At just a tender young age of 3, Mozart would often watch in keen yearning as his sister had keyboard lessons with their father, and at the age of 5, he had already created his first musical compositions. He even taught himself the violin on his own initiative and worked long and hard hours to complete his compositions. All these are evidence of his passion for music without any form of external rewards. On the other hand, extrinsic motivation arises from the performance of the main task for the sake of acquiring another desired outcome. A common understanding is that extrinsic motivation results in an outcome that is otherwise not possible without the reward in place. The fear of punishment or threat can also be viewed as sufficient reason to motivate one's actions when it comes to extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation sees one being rewarded greatly from a particular activity. For instance, children at school are often subjected to extrinsic motivations in the form of gifts from their parents when it comes to performing well in examinations. A similar motivation could perhaps be the threat of getting punished should the child not excel in the similar test. Although it may seem as though negative extrinsic motivations are detrimental to people, research has shown that the threat of punishment increases one's intrinsic interest in the particular activity, and thus may serve as a double-edged sword, especially when it comes to parenting. Having their own merits, both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation is essential in our lives to help us achieve our goals and aspirations. Although you may respond to one form more than the other, utilizing them both in synergy would improve your approach in life. With that being said, Here are some techniques on how to cultivate motivation, along with advice on appropriate times to use intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. 1. Know when to use your intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is often long-lasting and requires little effort to sustain. It can be thought of as a passion, and the process of doing the activity is enough to keep one satisfied. Intrinsic motivation is thus best when used to help you achieve long-term goals and fulfill your life's calling. An example would be an intrinsic motivation to help others around you, and this could push you to excel at medical school in order to become a doctor. Extrinsic motivation, on the other hand, is often short-termed and would cease once the reward is withdrawn. As such, focus more on using extrinsic motivation for tasks that you need to complete eventually, even though it may not be of top priority for you. A simple example would be one motivating their self to exercise every day by simply rewarding the act with a cheat meal at the end of the workout. Bear in mind, however, that extrinsic motivation works best for developing a habit. So once you've got your habit in motion, it may be a good idea to seize the reward, especially if it may be detrimental to your well-being in the long term. 2. Create a goal for yourself. Perhaps you may have been too caught up in the moment that you don't seem to realize that your lack of motivation is a result of an inconclusive goal. Setting an attainable yet uncertain goal is extremely important to get yourself motivated because it doesn't trick your mind into thinking that you could easily achieve those goals and in turn lays away. Think of training for a marathon. Don't aim to be the first, but aim to be one of the top few and stick to a training routine that will not only help you attain your goal, but even surpass it. 3. Take a break. Working too intensely may blind your judgment and cause you to become myopic in your drive towards the end goal. Even if you're caught in the mindless frenzy of your work, see that you force yourself to take a breather. This doesn't mean you have to abstain from your work. You may simply take this time to see how far you've progressed and perhaps seek inspiration from other sources while you're taking a break. If you happen to see how far you've come since you first started, that alone will boost your motivation to further heights. Personally, whenever I get demotivated with my work, I would take an entire day off from doing the particular activity and simply use the time to find sources of creativity on platforms such as YouTube. In due time, I'd be recharged with the drive to start my work again, this time with more determination and ingenuity. Every accomplishment begins with the decision to try. Gather your motivation and let yourself take control of the situation, and before you know it, you'd be on the path to achieving great success. If you have any questions about areas of life where you're struggling or want to make improvements, please tell me in the comments below or write to me at Facebook or Twitter, and I'll make a video about how best to approach it.